Good afternoon. Peter is off today. At this hour, the season's 9th tropical storm is churning in the Atlantic, less than 200 miles from the coast of Florida. News Center 7's Denise White joins us now live from the National Hurricane Center in Coral Gables. She's got the latest on Tropical Storm Isidore. Denise?
Tropical Storm Isidore is trekking along in our direction at a slow, steady pace. The tropical storm was upgraded to a storm from a tropical depression 6 o'clock this morning. Right now, Isidore is about 75 miles east-southeast of Nassau and about 300 miles east-southeast of Miami. 45-mile-per-hour winds are gusting to 55 miles per hour. Forecasters here at the National Weather Service are watching Isidore very closely. However, Dr. Neil Frank says the possibility of the storm increasing to hurricane strength is remote.
However, the environment around the system is a little cool. That means that it is going to restrict the strengthening, and we don't see any change in that pattern coming in the next several hours. But we'll be monitoring it very carefully with our Air Force reconnaissance planes to see if there's any indication now that the winds are going to start increasing some.
Dr. Frank says, in effect, the battle is taking place in the Atlantic between Isidore and that cool air. Isidore wants to strengthen, but so far that moist air won't let him. If this continues, he will just remain a tropical storm, sending us bad weather with blustery winds and big squalls later this afternoon or evening. If Isidore gets into the warm Gulf Stream, he could gather strength, but frankly, forecasters can't predict which way it'll go. Dr. Frank says Isidore turned into a hurricane. If it turned into a hurricane, it would be a slow process, and there would be plenty enough time for us to respond. Right now, you should check your supplies, he says. Check the gas level in your car, make sure you have supplies, things you should have already done. He says there's no need for any panic buying. Jill?
Thank you, Denise. Those are some good ideas. That's Denise White reporting live from the National Hurricane Center in Coral Gables.
Good evening. You're looking at a live picture right now from outside Channel 7 studio in North Bay Village. Those clouds and wind gusts and some choppy water are courtesy of Tropical Storm Isidore, who came to life overnight in the Atlantic southeast of South Florida. Earlier today, Isidore pelted the Bahamas with several inches of rain, but there was no serious damage there. Throughout most of the afternoon, the storm has remained stationary east of Miami. Right now, South Florida is watching and waiting for any signs she may come ashore.
Let's go right now to Dr. Neil Frank at the National Hurricane Center, who's live. Dr. Frank?
This is a 6 p.m. update. We still have gale warnings in effect from Cape Canaveral southward to Dry Tortugas. We've had reports from an Air Force plane during the afternoon, and those reports have indicated that the storm has moved very little. However, we expect in the evening hours or tomorrow that the westward drift that we've observed earlier today will continue. At 6 p.m., the broad center remained near latitude 25.0 north, longitude 78.0 west. This position is about 160 miles east of Miami, and the center is located over the northern part of Andros Island. Andros Island is the westernmost island in the Bahama chain. Now, I want to call your attention to the fact that we've got rain areas all the way out to Andros Island. So maybe the least important feature of this particular storm is the center, because we're experiencing the outer fringes of the storm at the present time. Now, even though the steering currents remain relatively weak, we expect the storm to resume a westerly track tonight or Thursday. The slow forward motion increases the potential for some strengthening, and should this occur, then a hurricane watch may be necessary later tonight. And residents in the area of gale warnings, now that's from Dry Tortugas all the way up to Cape Canaveral, should be ready for quick action in case this occurs. Maximum winds are still 50 miles an hour, although we could experience some gust with winds a little higher than that in some of the squalls. You have heavy rains of 5 to 10 inches could occur over portions of South Florida if this system continues to move on towards the west later on tonight, and tides of 1 to 2 feet above normal could be experienced in the area of gale warnage tonight. And we're certainly indicating the small craft north of Cape Canaveral to St. Augustine and along the Florida west coast from Tarpon Springs all the way down to the Key should remain in port. Now, are there any questions?
What is the environmental characteristic? Does it favor strengthening?
No. As a matter of fact, that's been one of the positive things about this storm. The storm developed in an area of relatively cool air. And cool air is tending to prohibit the storm from strengthening and becoming better organized. Now, if it'll continue to move, then this cool air will have an effect and it won't go ahead and strengthen. But the thing we're concerned about now with the tendency for some slow motion today is that may allow the storm to respond to the warm ocean waters out of the Gulf Stream, and you could see some strengthening.
You have just had the latest live update on Tropical Storm Isidore from Dr. Neil Frank, Director of the National Hurricane Center in Coral Gables.
Tonight, residents in Broward aren't taking any chances in case Isidore throws a surprise punch along the coast. Mark Rowland has more from our Fort Lauderdale News Center. Mark?
Thanks, Peter. Just as soon as forecasters upgraded Isidore to a tropical storm this morning, the Broward County Office of Emergency Preparedness swung into action and began implementing contingency plans to minimize any damage here. Right now, the fourth floor conference room at the Broward Government Center has been transformed into a sort of disaster control center. It's probably the busiest place in town here tonight. It is also the spot where News Center 7's Jan Fisher standing by with a live report. Jan?
Mark, if Isidore or Isidore, whichever one you prefer, comes this way, the people upstairs say they're ready for it.
Are your weather services in this building when it's operative?
Right.
Okay.
For most of them, the day started early. Months of earlier preparation have moved from the planning stage to standby. Along the beach, only a few people are boarding their windows in anticipation of heavy winds. For the most part, few are concerned with the threat of South Florida's first tropical storm of the season. Should Isidore strengthen to any considerable degree, the beaches will be evacuated. Boats along the mouth of the New River will be moved inland, and emergency officials will swing into action.
American Red Cross Disaster Services.
Red Cross officials say they have 500 volunteers and 23 evacuation shelters standing by, but at this point, none are open.
We're always concerned about a storm that develops very quickly like this storm. This is one reason why we teach hurricane preparedness and promote it all year long for people in the general public. You know, they shouldn't wait till right now. They should have done all their preparations 30 days ago.
Should evacuation become necessary, the Red Cross advises to pack a 2-day supply of clothing, bring medication, your own bedding, and if possible, provide your own transportation. In the meantime, do like these workmen at Port Everglades, lash down anything that could be picked up and thrown through the air by heavy winds.
And with the latest information here available here at the Disaster Control Center is Art St. Armand. And can you tell me what's happening now? What do you know?
Well, we just had our latest briefing from Neil Frank a moment ago, as we all heard, and we're talking right now of a tropical storm, and hopefully it'll stay that way. We're prepared to move should that deteriorate.
At what point will you decide to evacuate should that become necessary?
Well, evacuation doesn't apparently appear to be one of our necessary actions. What we're really talking about is looking to the ones who are most prone to this thing, which would probably be the mobile home community. We've issued an alert to those people to be prepared to make some definite move if necessary should this worsen. But we are looking at a tropical storm and hopefully at worst a minimal hurricane.
And no life-threatening situation at this point?
Not at this point in time, no.
Thank you very much for being with us.
My pleasure.
Mark, of course, we will be standing by here with crews throughout tonight. We will bring you the latest update on any information that comes available to us.
Thanks, Jan. We'll remind you all again, just for the record, current plans call for no one being evacuated at this time, nor will that be necessary unless the storm turns significantly worse. Right now, emergency officials tell me they do not consider this to be a life-threatening situation, assuming one reacts with some good old-fashioned common sense. Peter?
At the top of our newscast, we went live to the National Hurricane Center in Coral Gables for the latest on Tropical Storm Isidore. Well, experts there are still working feverishly tracking that storm, and News Center 7's Michael Williams is standing by live there with the latest. Michael?
Sally, again, very little change since the last advisory at 6 o'clock. Isidore is about 160 miles east of Miami, off the Miami coast, moving very slowly, really drifting a little bit westward, but not quite as much as the forecasters here would like. The reason being that they don't want it to stay stationary over warm Gulf waters and therefore pick up strength possibly and develop into something worse than a tropical storm. But again, at this point, you couldn't even say it's really moving. It's more of a drifting action. The strongest winds at the center of the storm are about 50 miles an hour. And of course, you can bet that the forecasters here at the Hurricane Center are working overtime this evening trying to keep up with what Isidore will do next. Just as you'd expect, the pace and perhaps the pulse beats of National Hurricane Center forecasters are picking up. They're staying glued to the very latest visual displays on Tropical Storm Isidore, as well as poring over computer readouts on it. Isidore is the 9th tropical storm of this 1984 hurricane season, and just as with the others, experts here, even with all their high technology, can, in the end, only wait and see how Mother Nature will play out her hand with this one.
My expertise is not keeping pace with the increase in coastal population. And so we've got a tremendous problem in trying to deal with this unexpected that often occurs when you're forecasting hurricanes.
We're speaking generally in this case.
Yeah, exactly, right.
All right, so again to summarize, forecasters here at the National Hurricane Center hoping that Isidore will continue or start up again to move a little bit slowly west so that the strength is not able to build up in the tropical storm. And they'll be keeping an eye on it throughout the evening, as we will be doing here at the Hurricane Center. Sally?
Good evening. We're going to go right to Dr. Neil Frank at the National Hurricane Center live.
Because that means it will have a minimum of time out over the Gulf Stream, and therefore we trust that it's not going to go ahead and strengthen. Now, we've had no airplane flying into the system tonight. There's no indications at all of any further strengthening. Winds continue about 50 miles an hour. Now, I want to emphasize for you that this is a tropical storm. It's not a hurricane. And so the reaction and the actions that you need to take in response to a tropical storm are far different than that with a hurricane. Again, we emphasize that the primary concern is to the marine community. And I trust that most of the people who have boats that are in marinas or in vulnerable locations have done something to make sure that they're protected against winds of 40, 50, maybe even some gusts to 60 miles an hour. Now, the other thing that I'd like to stress about this is that there's a lot of weather between the center that's about 120 miles to the east of us, or east-southeast of us, out near Andros Island, and the coastline. We've already had a lot of rain squalls move on across the coastline tonight, and as the night progresses, if the storm continues to move towards the west, we'll continue to see more of those squalls come in. Some of them may even be a little stronger than we've experienced already. So that the storm is already influencing us. It's not a question of it being out there. We're already under the influence of it, and as the center approaches the coastline, maybe tomorrow conditions might improve. So we're very thankful tonight that we continue to see this west motion. That means that the probability of some strengthening is reduced, and if we can continue to push this storm on west tonight and cross the coastline, then that'll be very good news for us.
And that's the latest on Tropical Storm Isidore from Dr. Neil Frank at the National Hurricane Service. Tonight, South Florida residents are ready to ride out this storm.
News Center 7's Nightside reporter Michael Williams is standing by at Miami Beach with a live report on the last-minute preparations there. Mike?
Peter, first of all, a somewhat funny feeling standing out here and looking into the deep dark of night and wondering what Mother Nature is doing with that tropical storm some 100 or so miles out at sea. But we can say that Isidore, as you've heard before, is being felt in the form of occasional slashing rains where I'm standing now and gusting winds. We're lucky right now that we're not being poured on by rain, because a few minutes ago that was the case. You'll also notice that the tides are rather high tonight, but that's maybe as much as anything else the fact that it's a normal cyclical cycle right now, and the tides should naturally be perhaps a little higher than normal. However, if Isidore does continue to move in closer to South Florida, we may very well see the tides rise 1 to 3 feet above normal. Now, aside from the telltale signs that we're seeing out here, the rain and the winds and so forth, what we saw tonight was a lot of South Floridians who are making simple, common sense preparations and are not sitting idly by, worrying or waiting to see whether or not Isidore will hit upon South Florida. Better safe than sorry. Many a South Floridian was taking that old adage to heart tonight, stocking up on food staples and other items that would help them ride out Tropical Storm Isidore.
We got tape and we got batteries, yes. So we're getting set.
Just being on the safe side in case the storm hits.
Yes, we are.
While personal storm preparations picked up pace tonight, so did much broader community action plans. Here in Dade, all the county's public agencies as well as the utility and phone companies are gathered here at the Emergency Operations Center. It's the nerve center where they stand poised and ready to deal with anything Tropical Storm Isidore brings our way.
Metro Dade Police Department is on standby right now, and once we give the word from this particular position, the Metro Police can essentially double the manpower that's on the street and have an equal force ready to come on to relieve them after 12 hours of duty.
And all other agencies are ready to beef up their manpower?
All the other agencies in Dade County are similarly prepared where they have their persons on standby.
A note here for Dade residents, if you want accurate, up-to-date information on Tropical Storm Isidore, you can call a special rumor control number. It's 596-8735. Again, that number, 596-8735. Okay, Broward residents, we haven't forgotten you by any stretch of the imagination. There's a hotline number for you to call as well up in Broward. That's 357-8454 for more information on Tropical Storm Isidore. And speaking of Broward, Jan Fisher's been up there all night looking and watching how people are tracking the course of Isidore there. And he says at this hour the mood in Broward is one of cautious optimism. Jan?
I think it would be safe to say that for the most part, people here know that Isidore is not a hurricane, but just a tropical storm. Even so, they're taking the threat very seriously. Boat slips along Fort Lauderdale Beach are mostly empty tonight. A lot of people decided to move to safer anchor. Many of those still on the intercoastal near the ocean are making plans to move on. Others have decided to wait a while and test their luck. Are you concerned at all about the weather at this point?
Yeah, and then again, no. We're looking forward to a little clear. We don't want to move out. It's a little trouble for us. Being as it's going to be dark and all, going up there in the coastal and the wind blowing and everything, it's not going to be too much fun if it gets any worse.
Northeast winds near 20 knots and seas 5 to 8 feet. Seas higher.
Still others are monitoring local radio advisories, trying to make up their minds about the best time to haul anchor and move to safer harbor.
We're watching it closely. At this point, we're presently only under storm warnings, and unless we get hurricane warnings, I think we'll be okay right here.
One of the major concerns here is the tide. If the water rises much more, many of the docks will be underwater.
It has not increased in strength yet. It's still...
In the Emergency Preparedness Center, volunteers are manning telephones, providing up-to-the-minute information on the storm's position and strength. And even though there have been some heavy rains here, there have been no high winds. And so far, that's good news for the people here in Broward County. And with me is Floyd Johnson, who's the county administrator here. And Floyd, can you give me a status report?
Status report right now, Jan, is that we're carefully monitoring the situation. We don't expect until about the next hour the latest advisory coming from Miami weather. But at this point in time, we're taking a very hard look at monitoring the wind conditions because we are concerned about our mobile home dwellers. But we are in a high state of readiness here, and I think we're prepared to deal with the situation.
How about flooding? If it rains any harder, if we get some heavy rains that we have in the past, we've had some areas of the county that are flooded. Are you concerned about that?
Indeed we are, and the latest advisory said that we might expect up to 10 inches of rain. We started early this afternoon opening our gates to try and get as much help in that situation as we can, but if we get 10 inches, we can expect our low-lying areas to expect some flooding, but again, we are prepared to deal with that situation as well.
Good enough. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
And so there you have it. The attitude here at the Emergency Preparedness Center is one of cautious optimism. Back to you, Peter and Sally.
Thanks, Jan.
Good afternoon. Tropical storm Isidore came ashore around 9 o'clock this morning, dumping a downpour on South Florida.
We have reports from both Dade and Broward counties, but first, we'll check in with Dr. Neil Frank at the National Hurricane Center for an update on the storm. Dr. Frank, what's the situation?
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Gale warnings remain in effect from north of Key Largo up to Cape Canaveral. Now, reports from coastal radars, that would be in the Palm Beach area, show that the center of Isidore is moving towards the north-northwest along and parallel to the Florida coast north of Palm Beach. Since a large part of the circulation remains out over the water, the expected weakening has been delayed some. If this motion continues, that is, the center continues to move along that coastline and remains just a little bit off the coast, then gale warnings may have to be extended north of Cape Canaveral later this afternoon. All coastal residents along the east central Florida coast and in northeast Florida should stay in very close touch with future releases on this storm. Now, for those of you who are plotting the points, at noon the center was near 27.0 north, 80.1 west. A NOAA plane is monitoring the system this morning and has found no indications of any weakening. Winds are still 50 miles an hour, and we've had reports from Vero Beach within the last hour of winds gusting to 45 to 50 miles an hour. Tides of 1 to 2 feet above normal can be expected along the coastline north of the center, and you can also expect another 3 to 5 inches of rain in the central part of the east section of Florida and on into the northeastern coast of Florida as the center moves in that particular direction. We'll have another update at 3 o'clock this afternoon.
That's Dr. Neil Frank from the National Hurricane Center with the latest update on Isidore.
Peter, right now, News Center 7's Stephanie Stahl is feeling the full effect of the storm in Pompano Beach. Stephanie, how does it look?
Well, Jill, right now it looks pretty dismal. It's real wet out here. There's lots of rain, some winds, some gusts, but I have to tell you, basically it's like a pretty typical South Florida thunderstorm. The only thing with this one, we don't have a lot of lightning or thunder. One of the few signs that a tropical storm has hit South Florida are the unusually high tides that we're seeing right now. Surprisingly, the ocean is pretty calm. It's not all that rough out there. A big concern here in Pompano, though, is beach erosion. A huge restoration project has just been completed. We don't know yet how much damage this storm will do to that project. Another thing, because of all this constant rain, there is some flooding in low-lying areas. So if you're going to be out and about, you need to watch out for that flooding. Other than that, the attitude pretty much has been, where's the storm? That was the situation overnight and this morning. An eerie tranquility loomed at sunrise with heavy dark clouds on the horizon.
It's like the old saying, the calmness before the storm, you know? It's really pretty, but you don't know what's hiding behind it.
I'm just scared of stuff like that. I've never been through one. I don't know what to expect.
Kenneth Hughes was up early too. For him, Isidore's high tides could bring valuables.
The wave action washes up coins, jewelry, artifacts, anything from the surf, and it uncovers anything that's buried in the sand.
On the roads, morning rush hour traffic reported smoother than usual. Cautious drivers leaving a little extra drive time. Other than slick roads, it was business as usual. Y'all worried about the tropical storm?
No, not too much.
Why not?
Because I really don't think it's going to, I think Florida's going to be spared from the storm this year.
What I'm going to do is to leave the EOC set up in place, but we don't have to man it with this full staffing. Department directors can return to their regular offices.
At the County Emergency Center, a long night of anticipation wrapped up early, leaving only a skeleton staff and plenty of people to answer the storm information hotline.
But we believe that you can go about your normal business. The brunt of whatever we had out there went ashore in Palm Beach County rather than Broward and Dade.
As you have heard, Tropical Storm Isidore has made landfall north of us in Palm Beach County. We have News Center 7 crews up there right now covering the very latest. At this point, fortunately, it looks like South Florida has been spared the brunt of a full-force hurricane. Let's hope it stays that way. Regardless, we'll be out here tracking the storm for you, bringing you the very latest developments. That's it for now. Peter and Jill?
Thank you, Stephanie. Stay dry.
Try to.
That's Stephanie Stahl live from Pompano Beach. Peter?
Florida's weather is getting back to normal tonight. This is a very different picture from the one we showed you last night at 6 when Tropical Storm Isidore was pelting our area with high winds and heavy rains. Good evening. Isidore has left South Florida behind.
The storm is now heading north up the coast. News Center 7 crews have been tracking Isidore since last night. We have several reports, beginning with News Center 7's Stephanie Stahl.
Well, Peter, blue skies are back. The sun is peeking out as it goes down in the west. In fact, we had a rainbow here on Fort Lauderdale Beach just a moment ago. We still do have some real gusty winds out here right now. A little bit of light rain and drizzle, and that's pretty much been the situation all day. As Tropical Storm Isidore passed across our community, she left us with a lot of rain and wind, but fortunately, no damage. The storm really never materialized into a big threat or posing any major damage or concern. The only minor problems here in Fort Lauderdale was the flooding. Fort Lauderdale's famed Las Olas Islands turned into a big puddle. With high tide, the once neat Finger Canal spilled over onto sidewalks and streets, making walking easier than driving at times. Further north, students with a scheduled day off went fishing without poles when canals covered docks. The soggy day started with a tranquil sunrise, the storm hovering just off the coast. The curious ventured out with the misty daylight, looking for a clue to the threatening and unpredictable storm.
It's like the old saying, the calmness before the storm, you know? It's really pretty, but you don't know what's hiding behind it.
I don't like it.
Why?
I don't know. I'm just scared of stuff like that. I've never been through one. I don't know what to expect.
Expecting bigger waves, hordes of surfers hit the beach, but great expectations soon vanished. Once over land, Isidore fizzled to a drizzle. But for Kenneth Hughes, she was good enough to bring some prized trinkets.
The wave action washes up coins, jewelry, artifacts, anything from the surf, and it uncovers anything that's buried in the sand.
Commuters expected to be buried in a rush hour traffic jam that never materialized. For most, it was just another working day, business as usual.
Y'all worried about the tropical storm?
No, not too much.
Why not?
Because I really don't think it's going to, I think Florida's going to be spared from the storm this year.
It's not really that big of a high wind or anything, so it shouldn't cause that much of a problem.
We believe that you can go about your normal business. The brunt of whatever we had out there went ashore in Palm Beach County rather than Broward and Dade.
Broward's special storm hotline was jammed with calls. A crisis team reassured residents and spent the night anticipating trouble, but their preparedness was never tested and the team disbanded early.
We don't have to man it with this full staffing. Department directors can return to their regular offices.
Now, after a night of anticipation, Tropical Storm Isidore finally hit land as expected between about 10 and 11 this morning in West Palm Beach. And that's where News Center 7's Anna Maria Bell was to greet the storm. She says there was one major inconvenience.
By 10:30 a.m., the eye of the storm passed between Broward and Palm Beach counties. For a while, it looked as though the worst was over. The calm didn't last. In Palm Beach, there was trouble on A1A. Part of the highway south of Southern Boulevard was washing into the ocean.
To give you an idea of the extent of the damage, this seawall was standing here yesterday. Now it's caved into the ocean because of the unseasonably high tide coupled with the strong surge.
Trucks came in and out of the area throughout the day. They were loaded with mud. The workmen weren't repairing the road. They were trying to save what was left. Because of potential danger, the road was closed, causing an inconvenience for some.
A lot of people who work in Palm Beach don't live here, and they live out in the suburbs, and they use this road to get to and from work. And it's a pretty sizable detour to go over through West Palm Beach and the other suburbs, and all the traffic to get to a job if you actually work in Palm Beach and live down south of here.
Another inconvenience, 50-mile-per-hour winds knocked out power to some homes. Schools were closed, but that didn't keep some youngsters inside.
The reason why I came out here because it was boring in the house, just sitting around, and that it's a good time to fish because there's radioactivity in the water and it makes them jump around and stuff, and it's a good time to go fishing.
The Pelicans had the same idea. Unusually high waves attracted sightseers and avid surfers. Some, like Jay Kelson and a friend, drove up from Miami.
Everything is in the car, and we're ready to go.
Fortunately, this tropical storm became more of a curiosity than a danger. Anna Maria Bell, News Center 7, Palm Beach County.
And the curious are out here on Fort Lauderdale Beach. There's a lot of swimmers out here already. By the way, the ocean never got very rough today. It stayed pretty calm. Now, as for A1A, the popular beach strip here, traffic is moving real smoothly at this hour. It never got very bad at all today. And I guess just a few people now out trickling out, seeing what's left, and there isn't much left. The sun's coming back out, just some heavy winds. Peter and Sally?
Stephanie, how did people react to the storm?
People reacted pretty well. They all went to work, went about their business. There's one important thing to remember here, though, that South Florida has been very lucky. We have not had a bad hurricane here for a long time. So we need to guard against complacency because hurricanes can be very vicious and dangerous. It's something we all need to remember.
Good point. We're still in hurricane season. Thank you, Stephanie. That's Stephanie Stahl reporting live from Fort Lauderdale Beach.